Hey guys, welcome back to The Readers. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is a pro-revenge story. This is a story about a piece of crap receiving their deserved karma several years later. Back in 2019, I worked in the wonderful world of retail. It's sadly normal to deal with a constant stream of awful customers that make you question humanity, and some are so terrible that their actions stay burned in your memory forever. Fortunately, one of these unforgettable moments gave me the chance for perfect revenge. I had only worked for about a year at this newly constructed superstore in Denver when I started getting comfortable with the job. I was learning which customers were genuinely nice and which ones made me wonder how they functioned in society. Being naturally introverted and conflict-averse, this wasn't ideal, but at least I had Mrs. Henderson, this absolutely delightful elderly customer who always brightened my day with her warm smile and kind words. I hadn't seen her for a few weeks when one morning I spotted her car pulling into the disabled parking space. She had a proper blue badge. This time, though, she struggled out of her car on crutches with a cast on her leg. Before I could even say hello, this massive black pickup truck without any disabled badge squealed into the disabled space next to her. Out jumped this contractor, probably in his early 40s, with his teenage son. Mrs. Henderson, bless her heart, wasn't having any of it. She stood her ground and said politely, "Excuse me, sir, but this space is reserved for disabled badge holders. I noticed you don't have one displayed." The contractor's response made my blood boil. He turned to his son and said loudly, "Look here, Tommy, another one of these fakers trying to milk the system." Then he faced Mrs. Henderson directly. "That cast looks pretty fake to me, lady. Probably just another scammer looking for handouts." He then proceeded to do an exaggerated limping walk while his son laughed. "Oh, look at me, I'm so disabled," he mocked as they walked away. Mrs. Henderson just stood there, visibly shaken. I never," she stammered, clutching her crutches tighter. Being the coward I was then, I did nothing. Later, I weakly mentioned it to my manager, Sarah, who just shrugged and said, "Not our problem. We can't police the parking lot." For the next few years, I kept seeing this jerk, let's call him Mr. Tough Guy, coming into our store in his shiny black pickup. He'd consistently park in disabled spaces, and I'd grit my teeth every time I saw him swagger past the entrance. Fast forward to 2023, and I was still at the store when we finally got some amazing news. Management had partnered with a parking enforcement company, but instead of bringing in external officers, they gave us staff members digital ticketing devices. This was my moment. Learning the system was a breeze, and I couldn't wait to put it to use. There were 3 simple rules. No parking in disabled spaces without a badge, no parking in parent and child spaces without children, and vehicles must be properly parked within marked bays. The first time I spotted his truck in the disabled bay, I practically sprinted out with my ticketing device. "Got you," I whispered, snapping photos and entering his details for a nice $100 fine. But why stop there? Since it took weeks for tickets to arrive in the mail, I had plenty of opportunities. Every time he parked illegally, which was often, I'd be there with my trusty device. When he finally stopped using disabled spaces, he moved to the parent and child bays. "Think you're clever, do you?" I muttered, taking photos of his empty truck with no child seats in sight. Click, click, another fine. Eventually, he gave up on those spots too, but started parking across multiple spaces. That's when I heard him yell at his son one day, "These spaces are too damn small for my truck." I smiled to myself. "That's another ticket for you, buddy." By early 2024, the external parking company took over, but I'd already done my work. Just last month, I saw him screaming at some poor parking attendant. "It's you, isn't it? You're the one who's been targeting me." I walked past, suppressing a grin. 3 years of fines, probably totaling thousands of dollars, and he still hadn't figured out who it was. Justice served, Mrs. Henderson, justice served. The next one is an entitled people's story. I never thought I'd end up in court defending my own property against an entitled homeowner association president, but here we are. This whole saga started about 8 months ago when I purchased an old warehouse with an adjacent parking lot in a developing area of town. Let me give you some background first. I'm a 45-year-old small business owner. I run a furniture restoration workshop, and I'd been looking to expand my operation for years. When I found this property, a 1950s warehouse with great bones and a spacious parking lot, I knew it was perfect. The location was ideal. just on the edge of a residential area but still zoned for light commercial use. The previous owner had passed away and his children were eager to sell. I got a great deal, did my due diligence with property surveys and title searches, and closed the purchase in March. The warehouse needed work, but that's my specialty. I spent the first few months renovating the space, turning it into a proper workshop with a small showroom in the front. The parking lot was actually one of the property's best features. It could fit about 30 cars comfortably, which was more than I needed for my business, but great for future expansion. Enter Karen Harrison, president of the Oak Ridge Heights Homeowner Association, representing the residential community adjacent to my property. I first met her in June when she marched into my workshop unannounced, designer handbag swinging, perfectly coiffed blonde hair, and that signature, "I want to speak to the manager" energy radiating off her. "Excuse me," she said, looking around my workshop with obvious disdain. "Are you the owner?" I was in the middle of refinishing an antique dresser, but put down my tools. "Yes, I am. How can I help you?" "I'm Karen Harrison, president of the Oak Ridge Heights Homeowners Association. We need to discuss your parking lot." I wiped my hands on my work apron. "What about it?" "Well," she said, pulling out her phone, "our community has been using that lot for overflow parking for years. The previous owner never had an issue with it, but now my residents are telling me they're seeing no parking signs going up." "That's correct," I replied. "I purchased this property for my business and I need the parking space for my customers and deliveries." Karen's face twisted like she'd smelled something unpleasant. "That's simply not acceptable. This lot has been available to our residents for over a decade. You can't just come in and change things." "Actually, I can. It's my property." "It's been used by our community for years. That makes it a prescriptive easement." I had to admire her confidence in throwing around legal terms she clearly didn't fully understand. "That's not how prescriptive easements work, Ms. Harrison. The previous owner explicitly allowed parking as a courtesy. There was no adverse possession. I have the deed and property surveys right here in my office if you'd like to see them." "Well," she huffed, "we'll just see about that. The Homeowner Association Board will be hearing about this." I shrugged. "They're welcome to review my property documentation, but the lot stays private." She stormed out, but I knew this wouldn't be the end of it. I've dealt with enough entitled people in my years of business to recognize when someone's just getting started. Sure enough, over the next few weeks, residents kept parking in my lot despite the signs. I started having cars towed, which led to angry confrontations. Karen would show up at least once a week, making increasingly bizarre claims about community rights and threatening legal action. The situation escalated when I installed security cameras and a chain-link fence. The day after the fence went up, I arrived at work to find Karen and 3 other homeowner association board members waiting for me. "This is harassment," Karen declared as I unlocked the gate. "You can't fence in community property." "Again, this isn't community property," I said, starting to lose patience. "I have all the documentation proving my ownership." One of the board members, a retired-looking man in golf clothes, stepped forward. "Now see here, young man. We've been using this lot since before you were born. You can't just come in and disrupt our community's way of life." I checked my watch, already tired of this conversation. "I'm running a business here. If you have legal concerns, have your attorney contact mine. Otherwise, please leave my property." Karen pulled out her phone and started recording. "Everyone needs to see how this person is treating long-standing members of our community. We'll see how your business does when people learn about your attitude." "Are you threatening me with defamation, Ms. Harrison?" "It's not defamation if it's true," she snapped. I just shook my head and went inside. That afternoon, I had my attorney send a cease and desist letter to the Homeowner Association Board. I thought that might finally end things, but oh boy was I wrong. A week later, I was served with lawsuit papers. The Homeowner Association, led by Karen, was suing me for unlawful restriction of prescriptive easement and community property rights violation. The complaint was full of legal-sounding language that made absolutely no sense from a property law standpoint. I immediately called my attorney, Sarah Martinez, who had helped me with the property purchase. "Don't worry," she said after reviewing the complaint. "This is completely frivolous. They don't have a leg to stand on legally. The previous owner's permission for parking explicitly prevents any prescriptive easement claim, and we have documentation of that." "How long will this take to resolve?" I asked, worried about the impact on my business. We'll file a motion to dismiss, but knowing Judge Harrison, he'll probably want to hear arguments. Give it a couple of months, tops, and we'll definitely be asking for attorney's fees given how frivolous this is. The next 2 months were interesting, to say the least. Karen started organizing protests outside my workshop. She and her supporters would stand on the public sidewalk with signs saying things like "Save our parking" and "Stop business bullying." They posted negative reviews of my business online, even though none of them had ever been customers. I documented everything meticulously. Every interaction, every protest, every attempted illegal parking incident. The security cameras proved to be a great investment, capturing several instances of Karen and others attempting to cut the chain on my gate or vandalizing the fence. Finally, our court date arrived. I put on my best suit, not easy for a guy who works with furniture restoration all day, and headed to the courthouse. Karen showed up with what looked like half the homeowner association board, all of them dressed like they were heading to a country club luncheon. Judge Harrison was a no-nonsense older man who clearly had little patience for frivolous cases. As soon as Karen's attorney started presenting their case, the judge's expression grew increasingly skeptical. "Your Honor," Karen's attorney began, "the Oak Ridge Heights community has been using this parking lot for over 10 years, under the doctrine of prescriptive easement." The judge interrupted. "Counselor, are you aware that prescribed use must be adverse to the owner's interest to qualify for prescriptive easement?" "Yes, Your Honor, but—" "And do you have any evidence that the previous owner didn't explicitly permit this use?" "Well, no, but—" Judge Harrison turned to my attorney. "Ms. Martinez, I assume you have documentation regarding the previous owner's position on this matter?" Sarah stood up. "Yes, Your Honor. We have signed statements from the previous owner's children confirming their father allowed parking as a courtesy, plus written documentation from community newsletters acknowledging this arrangement as a generous offer from our neighbor." The judge nodded. "Ms. Harrison, please approach the bench." Karen strutted forward like she was about to accept an award. "Ms. Harrison, are you aware that filing frivolous lawsuits can result in sanctions?" Karen's confident smile faltered slightly. "Your Honor, we're simply trying to protect our community's interests." "By making legally baseless claims and harassing a legitimate business owner?" The judge shuffled through some papers. "I see here you've also been organizing protests and encouraging negative reviews of the defendant's business. We have the right to protest." "Not when it crosses into harassment and defamation," the judge replied sternly. "This case is dismissed with prejudice. Furthermore, I'm ordering the homeowner association to pay the defendant's legal fees, and I'm issuing a restraining order preventing you and your organization from interfering with the defendant's business operations." Karen's face turned an impressive shade of red. "But, Your Honor, additionally," the judge continued, "I'm fining you personally $5,000 for filing a frivolous lawsuit. Perhaps that will encourage you to seek legal counsel before making baseless claims in my courtroom." Dismissed. The look on Karen's face was priceless. She stood there speechless as her attorney gathered their papers. As they left the courtroom, I could hear her starting to berate the poor lawyer about appealing the decision. The aftermath was surprisingly peaceful. With the restraining order in place and the hefty fine to pay, Karen finally backed off. The homeowner association board apparently held an emergency meeting and voted to remove her as president after learning how much my legal fees would cost them. The new homeowner association president, a reasonable woman named Janet, came to see me about a week after the court case. Unlike Karen, she actually made an appointment and was professional from the start. "I want to apologize for all the trouble," she said. "The board had no idea Karen was going to take things this far. We've implemented new procedures requiring board approval and legal review before any legal action can be taken." I appreciated the gesture. "Thank you. I hope you understand I'm not trying to be difficult. I just need the space for my business." Janet nodded. "Of course. Actually, that's partly why I'm here. Several of our residents have seen your restoration work through your windows, and they're interested in your services. Would you consider offering a small discount to community members? It might help smooth things over." I thought about it and agreed to offer a 10% discount to Oak Ridge Heights residents. It was a good business move, and honestly, most of the community members had just been following Karen's lead. Since then, I've gotten quite a bit of business from the neighborhood, and several residents have become regular customers. As for Karen, I heard she moved out of Oak Ridge Heights a few months later. Apparently, she couldn't handle the embarrassment of losing her position and having to pay the fine. Last I heard, she was trying to start trouble in another community across town. I almost feel sorry for them. Almost. The whole experience taught me several valuable lessons. First, always keep meticulous records and documentation of your property rights. Second, invest in good security cameras. They're worth their weight in gold when dealing with difficult people. And third, sometimes you have to stand your ground even when it would be easier to give in to unreasonable demands. My business has been thriving since then. I expanded the showroom area last month, and I'm even thinking about hiring another restoration specialist to help with the increased workload. The parking lot that caused all the trouble? It's usually half full now with customers' vehicles, and I've never had another issue with unauthorized parking. I did make one small change though. I put up a new sign at the entrance to the lot. It reads, "Private property, customer parking only." Yes, really. Sometimes you have to maintain your sense of humor about these things. The best part? Every now and then, when I'm working late in my workshop, I'll look out at my peaceful, properly used parking lot and smile, remembering Karen's face when the judge issued his ruling. Sometimes justice does prevail, even if you have to fight for it. I've shared this story with other small business owners in the area, and it's become something of a cautionary tale about standing up to entitled people who try to bully their way into getting what they want. Several of them have told me it gave them the courage to deal with their own difficult situations. In the end, what could have been a nightmare turned into a positive turning point for my business. Sometimes you have to weather a storm to come out stronger on the other side. And hey, at least it makes for an interesting story to tell at business networking events. The only downside? Every time I see someone pull into my lot with a "I want to speak to the manager" haircut, I get a little nervous. But so far, no one's tried to claim adverse possession of my property again. I guess one Karen per parking lot is enough for any business owner's lifetime. The next one is a petty revenge story. My girlfriend is currently being her adorable self and baking in the kitchen. She's doing her thing, with The Hangover on in the background and her favorite giant bear hoodie on. I think today she's using Just Hood lemon bar recipe. If you don't know it, then check it out. Bloody delicious. Reminded me of this from a few years ago. Girlfriend and I worked for the same company, in different areas, on different floors. This was pre-COVID. Girlfriend loves baking and sharing more than eating the stuff herself. Also, big news for those that have read my previous posts, girlfriend has moved in. Man, I am ecstatic. Girlfriend would bring in her goods maybe 3 times a week. The head of her department, Matt, got a little tin and made a little sign, something like, "If you enjoyed a treat, please leave a contribution so girlfriend can keep baking." Then there was Karen. I go down to my girlfriend's floor one day to talk to someone and the vibe is off. Girlfriend looks kinda withdrawn. People are buzzing. Matt looks furious. The treats are on Matt's desk. Turns out someone emptied the contribution tin and left a note saying the last few baked goods weren't up to par, so they'd emptied the tin as a form of refund for past contributions. Girlfriend had a hard night. Thought about baking something gross as revenge. Got upset thinking maybe her baking really is crap. Considered stopping altogether. I told her to consider stopping giving them away for free. Next day, I'm called into a meeting. Most of upper management, client services, etc. were talking about the baking and the note, and people were pissed. I'd love to say it was because girlfriend was universally adored, as she should be, but it was mostly the bullying and how the baked goods were free for our company, but great for our morale. Matt spoke to girlfriend and basically said if she wanted to keep baking, he'd love it, and a few colleagues had decorated an empty desk on the 3rd floor specifically for people to share their baked goods. Under a camera, near my team. Girlfriend is a professional, but man, she almost cracked when she saw the table. I'll have to try to find a picture. The tin was replaced, with a tiny padlock. Next time Karen appeared for a treat, a woman from my team jumped up and stopped her, telling her that they weren't up to par and basically told her to duck off. More people started baking, and Matt would share out the contributions. A picture of the table full of amazing goodies even made it to our website for a while. Karen ended up putting in a complaint about her entire floor. Apparently, every time she tried leading a training session, people started telling her that her teachings weren't up to par. She tried smoothing it over, not by apologizing, but by bringing in a tray of cheap donuts with a stupid sign saying that no contribution was needed. These were actually good and free. Those donuts had exactly 2 taken. One by Karen and the other returned with 1 bite missing and a note that said, "Not up to par." Matt even called their next team outing, "Who's up to party?" Apparently, Karen started complaining that she was trying to inspire girlfriend to do better, that buying her own treats was way more expensive and she needed the little treat to keep going some days, that now more people were baking, so really she'd inspired them, that she didn't know how to get past my team, who she couldn't insult and historically sucked up to. Karen tried demanding the snacks move back downstairs, but was told the note was deemed bullying and the downstairs canteen without cameras wasn't up to par. This went on until COVID hit. Duck Karen, and my girlfriend's baking is the tits. The next one is a malicious compliance story. When I was in high school, I wasn't very good at writing essays in English. I knew all the concepts, but flushing out a few pages of BS wasn't something I could do in 45 minutes of class time. For a few weeks, we had a student teacher completing her prac block. Knowing that kids circle substitute and student teachers like sharks, she didn't take any crap but overcompensated, and more than a few of the kids in my class checked out or outright antagonized her. This just made her more hostile to the smart-ass teenagers we were. For me, checkout was when I tried to answer a question about the use of a very specific term in a poem about WW1 soldiers. The author used wheeled chair instead of wheelchair. I put my hand up and gave some interpretation that made sense, and I was always told there's no wrong answers in these sorts of discussions. As a reward for participating, I was treated to a fairly harsh "no, you're wrong" noted. So we have to complete an essay on what we've learned the last few weeks, and the question is along the lines of, how did the author make you feel when reading? Text. Me, having mentally checked out of English class, not being good at that sort of thing, and being the crappy kid I was, wrote out a couple paragraphs summarizing the message of the text and saying that I didn't feel anything when reading it. The next Monday we get our essays back, and I've got a 5.25, more than I thought, so those 2 paragraphs must have been pretty good. The prac teacher takes me outside and goes on about how she's disappointed and I could have done better, and how everyone else wrote 2 or 3 pages, but I didn't get half a page done. It all seemed pretty disingenuous to me because she hadn't shied away from telling me or anyone else when we were wrong. She asked why I wrote that, and I replied that I genuinely didn't have an emotional reaction to it. Why lie? She then says I have the choice to either take the fail or rewrite the essay next class. Okay, I'll take the grade. No point wasting time. Her face dropped a bit, and she took a while to reply. Really? Are you sure? Yep, I'm no good at this sort of thing, remember? I didn't get it right in class, so why would that change overnight? Defeated, she sent me back to class and went next door for a few minutes. A little while later, I was called out again to speak with my actual teacher. She asked me why I didn't think I could do better, and what didn't I understand about the question. After talking for a while, she said that I will have to retake the essay with a new text and question, one that was worded so I couldn't just say, I didn't. In the end, I wrote around 2 pages and passed just. The prac teacher was there for another 2 weeks or so, and I noticed a few things. First, she didn't react with outright contempt when someone gave an answer that wasn't what she wanted. Second, she didn't try to play a game of wits against any more self-sabotaging teenagers. Bonus story about my actual teacher. She was younger and really nice, but now that I'm older, I think she was one of those sensitive but naive sorts of people. We had to come up with a TV pilot episode and read it out to the class. One kid read out the first episode of Burn Notice word for word, top marks and a heap of praise. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We'll see you again tomorrow.